Hi, it's Sam, aka LymphomaLass here, and today I'm going to show you something about lino cut printing. So, the first step to producing something like this is to work out your picture. I've done this by drawing the picture in pencil, and then what I've tried to do with some artists' pens is colour in black the areas that I would like to see black in my picture, because I'm going to use some black ink. I could use blue, and this will give me an idea too, or brown. And then when I come to do my lino cut, for this I've used Mastercut, SD Mastercut. So I've made my picture the size of a block of Mastercut. So I've drawn around my piece of Mastercut, and then within that I've designed my picture, first in pencil, then using some pens. So when I cut my lino, the bits I leave are going to be the white bits, and this is how it's coming out so far. I've not completed it. There's bits that I haven't cut yet, just to show you how to cut, and I've done something fancy to get a bit of red on it. Easy but fancy. But this is my block so far, and I've cut the block the reverse way round to the print and the original design. So it's cut, when it's cut, it's the reverse way round to what you're going to end up with, or what you intend to have. And I'm going to explain to you how I do that as well, because I know that's something a lot of people find difficult. So I've designed my picture. Don't think perfect, think rustic with lino cuts, especially when you start. Maybe you want to do perfect lino cuts, but rustic works really nice because the ink will adhere in better or worse ways, as you can see from mine, and that's half the charm of them. So what I've started with is I've got my design. To transfer my design, I've got a pack of multi-hardness or softness pencils, and I used a fairly soft pencil. So the soft pencils, I don't think it will show the sizing on it, but there it says 8B. B stands for soft, H stands for hard. So the old HB pencils that I know from school, they were midway between hard and soft. This is 8B, and it's very soft. So the graphite in it is kind of chalky and moves, compared to like a 7H, like I've got here, where it's very sharp point. And it's hard, basically. So B is soft, and H is hard. It's just, so I'm going for a fairly soft pencil. You can do it with a HB, but the best results are from a soft pencil, because it's the graphite you lay on what you're using to trace with will transfer easier if it's a high number B pencil. So to trace my image and transfer it to my block, I'm using a piece of greaseproof paper from the kitchen dispenser. And I'm just going to show you a tiny little piece of what I do, just to give you the idea. So I'm going to do the bird's legs. So I'm just colouring in with my pencil for white of the bird's legs. And at this point, if there's something about the design you don't like a legs or a foot, claw is too big, you can just make it smaller. So you perfect your design as you go along. So I've drawn in on my tracing paper in this soft pencil, so it's coming out quite deep for legs, and they're going the same way as in the design. Then what I'm going to do is flip it over so the pencil is against the block, and let me try and get them in the shot. The legs are going the opposite way round to the legs on the original picture, if you see that. Then to transfer it onto the block, all I'm going to do is, I've got an old Lymphoma Association pen, which I use a lot for this, which has run out of ink. So I'm not going to get ink all over myself, it's just empty. So I keep empty pens to do this. And I'm just going to run my pen along for the other side to where the pencil marks are. And because it's greaseproof paper, used baking parchment, basically used for baking, I can see where it is. I just need to use something, whatever it is, that I can see through to do this. And then hopefully you'll see it's transferred the image to my block in the same way as it is on the block I've cut, going the same way. So then when I print it and turn it over, it comes out going the same way as my original. Now, because when you're carving your block, your hands do tend to get over all of it, and it can smudge. And I found that when you're carving, you can find that your design smudges away or becomes less distinct, and that's a nuisance. So then what I do is I use my drawing pens and I go over the line again with drawing pens. So basically, this block, carving it, I've drawn it out on a piece of paper, I've traced round it on tracing paper, I then turned it over and traced round it again, and then I've drawn over those lines with these pens. I mean, this is the tracing paper I initially used, yeah? So in effect, before I even start carving, I've drawn it 4 times. And you can see it smudges, and I'm going to be washing this because I want to use it possibly for another project. So it will come off. So that's why I need to use these type of pens. So I hope that explains how to actually get your design onto your block. So let me put that all away. So the next stage is cutting it. So once you've drawn it 4 times, you want to cut it. So I use Essity tools. There's all kinds of tools on the market. I just happen to quite like these. And in a starter pack, I got a roller, a guard, which is very helpful because you slot your lino in there and it stops it moving when you're pushing with your knife. And this is called a barren, and when you're making your print, you rub it over to make the print come out more accurately. And it also came with a tray to roll my ink on and some water-soluble block printing ink. I would highly recommend water-soluble to people beginning in this, because I don't want to use lots of solvents. I'm doing this in my kitchen on a work surface, so I don't want to use lots of heavy-duty chemicals. So I've been working on this block, and you can see this is where I drew a snowflake. I'm just going to have to go for a minute, but I will be back in a mo. I don't know who else has this, but immediately you clear the house and you start videoing, somebody comes to the door with a package. Anyway, so resuming to this, apologies for the interruption. I've drawn here, or traced here, a snowflake and drawn over it with my pens. So I can just about see it still, and I've printed from this block and washed the block twice already. So what I was going to do for you was cut this piece and this piece, just to give you a demonstration of cutting lino. I'm going to put my guard there to stop it moving too much. Just be careful where you do this. Obviously, if you've got a beautiful dining room table that's wood, highly polished, you may not want to do it on that. You may want to do it. I quite often do my cutting on a coffee table that's actually tiled and very, very old, so it doesn't matter so much and it doesn't scratch. Okay, so these tools, this barren is actually on the SD kits, is where all the tools for cutting are. So I'm just going to unscrew this handle of the barren, take off this loop, and then in there I've got a treasure of bits to cut with. This bit holds your cutter in this bit, in the handle. So, let me find the ones I use. It gives you lots of different cutters, and if you're like me, you might just stick to one or two that you actually use. Let me open the lot. Right, that's the one I want. Put these all away. So that's the one I use a lot. And for the big areas, to take out the big areas, I might use something like this one, because it's like a shovel suit to get the bird's body out. Right. So to put the tool together, I just put the handle in the screw, and inside you can see there's a shape, and that's basically fits this, so that fits in there. You get it in firmly, you screw it down, and there we are. That's my tool. It's quite handy that it just comes in that little barren. So I'm just going to carve the snowflake just as a demonstration. Now the more pressure you put on it, the deeper your cut will be. When you're cutting and you're designing your pieces, think about the drawing principle of mark making. And when you're cutting, keep your fingers out of the way, because these are sharp. if they can do this to a bit of lino, although the lino is fairly soft, they can hurt you. So in drawing, the concept of mark making is that you will use your pen or your pencil to make different marks, and these will represent the atmosphere, the detail, all kinds of things about your work. And the same is very much true in lino cut making. It's quite difficult to get things to go exactly as you want, because sometimes they overrun or underrun, but that's how you get this kind of quite quite stylish, handcrafted look to lino cuts. So I've done the main legs of the snowflake, and I'm just taking out the smaller stems of it. I'm not worried that it's not perfect. It's a rustic scene. It's a bird in winter. It doesn't need to be an exact anatomical representation of a robin for people to get that it's a robin and to enjoy the piece. This is going to go on some Christmas cards. Just one more to do. So, cutting the snowflake, just get it to, has been quite easy to do because it's straight lines. Something that's more difficult to do is circles and spirals, because if you were doing it moving your cutter, you'd be kind of going like that, and you want to make them smoother. It's easier to get them in a continuous line. So how I've been doing them, and I'm not saying I'm doing it the right way, it's just our way, is I'm putting my cutter at the centre of my spiral, and then being careful to keep my fingers out of the way because I'm not using a guard at this stage. I apply pressure and move round the lino, not my cutter. So that's given me that one, and then I've got one more circle to do. I've got this one to do here. So it's very easy to get unevenness in it. That's why, you know, if you're going for a rustic style, this is great. If you want something very smooth, this might not be the best technique for you. I'm just going to try and neaten up those little bits a bit. I've got another trick to tell you about, because I was, when I was carving out this bit, I went round it with my knife, my cutter, my thin cutter, and then I used a thicker cutter to take the main body out. And then, because I want this to be pure white, I don't want any smudges from bits of lino left, I actually cut round it when it got thin with a pair of embroidery scissors. Just sharp embroidery scissors. I cut into it and got rid of it. But when I was doing it, because I was going to show you, this is great failings, I was going to show you how to cut this wing. And I accidentally cut off this whole bit. So this can happen sometimes in lino cutting. You cut off bits you don't intend to. So then what I did was I found a heat-proof surface. I got out my glue gun. On my heat-proof surface I'd lined one underneath, layer underneath with this baking parchment. I filled in the bit that I'd accidentally removed with hot glue gun glue, you know, the glue gun sticks. And then I flipped it over and pressed so it was smooth. So this is smooth. And then I've cut it. So it's not perfect, but again, it's about that rustic sense. So that's how it turned out on first print. I've got a bit of a ridge, so I've cut it some more. So we'll see how that goes. So I've now cut that star and that swirl, as you see. Just going to tidy up my tools, just to show you that they all go very neatly away, because I'm going to need this for a different purpose in a minute. I'm going to use it as a barren. So then put the lid on top and I screw it back down. Now, printing on your paper. I've been using this sketch pad with pull-out pages for my design and for my printing. But nice, I've managed to pull it out without spoiling it, ripping it, so that's great. Now when you come to laying your block down on it, you've got to ink the block evenly, and then you've got to try and lay it on without touching the front which you've inked at the right position. And it's very easy to get it a bit off, not quite right. So you can either trim afterwards, or what you can do is you can put your block on a piece of paper and accurately measure to get it in exactly the right position, draw around it with a pencil and then cut out the middle. And that's what I've done here. So I've made myself a little frame to try and help me print in the centre of the piece. I could do this with cardboard and it'll last a bit longer, but because I'm going to use my pieces for card making, so I'm going to trim them down more anyway, I just wanted to show you the basic principle that you ink up and then you get it in the right position by laying it on there. So we've got our paper ready, our block is ready. Now let's see about the inking. So, and I've also taught you a little bit about what happens if you cut out too much, which was maybe a happy accident. So, to ink it up, what I do is put a blob of ink on my tray. You could use a baking tray covered with greaseproof paper again, or you could use a tile, ceramic, a plain white level ceramic tile, or, as I say, if you get a kit, these come with kits quite often, the bigger kits. So then I'm just going to roll that to get it smoothly on my roller. Now, this might look like a lot of ink being wasted, but you need to have it as smooth as possible on your roller to be able to get it smooth on the block, the lino cut block you've produced. So that's why we need the tray. Then, I say I'm doing this without a covering over my work surface because this is washable, water-soluble ink. You roll it over your block. Now the bit I'm going to try and pay extra attention to is this bit here, because I've tried to fiddle around with it to get not such a big line where the bird's wing starts. In my experience, the more careful you are with this, the more sharp your lino cut print is. Right, I have fussed with that enough for now, so I have to see if I can do this. A moment of truth approaches. And then I'm going to flip it over like that, and I'm going to use my barren to rub it in. Okay, I'm just going to take a break for a moment because there's somebody else at the door. Right, let me get back to rubbing. Now, people also use all kinds of other tools for this. Metal soup spoons, tablespoons, wooden spoons. If you look online, you'll see all kinds of options. There's some beautiful glass barrens you can buy, cloth-covered barrens. The only thing with, this is called burnishing your print, with the barren is it's about just trying to smooth the paper into the lino, or if you're doing wooden block printing, into the wooden block. And you can, I use fairly thin paper, and I'm actually starting to see where the ink is adhering through the reverse of the paper. So now we think of printing, hand printing cards or pictures, as mass production, but hand printing really isn't. There's a lot of care and work goes into each print and labour, energy, after you've even cut your block. So if you receive a hand printed lino cut card this year, rather than one that's been scanned and then mass printed, treat it with love. Right, so let's reveal the big pull, whether it's any good or not. Looking good. Yeah. So it's not perfect because I did have that break in the cutting where I made a mistake. So I've got the same design. I might just totally redo it, but I think it's not bad. So that's black and white, or mono, you know, one colour and a white, or one colour and the colour of your paper. So you could do that brown and orange, brown and yellow, or whatever, if you want something more colourful, but a lot of the basic kits just come with black. I wanted to add a bit more colour, because these robins, and I wanted to say this was a robin. So I've got a little blob there, and I've got another one with a number of blobs. That's more realistic to how a robin is. That's more stylised. So how did I do that? Well, there are these lovely print blocks. I've got VersaCraft one, and this one is brilliant because you can actually print on fabric with it and then iron it between tea towels, and you set the ink. So they're very good. They're not necessarily that expensive for what they are. And all I did was, I thought, what else have I got that I can print with, apart from lino? Well, I had a cork. And so all I did was pressed it down in the ink to get good ink coverage. And then I decided where to put it in my picture. I want to put it more on his belly this time, because I think that would be good. Give it a good press. And there we are. I think that's quite stylish. Now, if you want to be like Cuffin Williams, the famous Anglesey artist, Royal Academician, who did a stunning lino cut self-portrait that I showed on a recent little reel of mine explaining art, demystifying art, you'll initial your work, and I tend to also sign it on the back in full, and it's nice sometimes on the back to date it and say what the name of the piece is and what the medium is. So I would say this is a lino cut robin, and leave it at that. And I think that, even though it's got the broken wing, which I think is in a way quite cute, it's not a perfect robin, would make quite a nice card for Christmas. So the other thing I was going to mention is, if you want more colour than just a blob from the cork, the other thing you can do is, with a sharp craft knife, instead of cutting this breast out in totality, gouging it out, pardon me, you can actually cut it straight out, cover it with ink from a block like that, slot it back together again, and then print. and that works stunningly. You just have to be careful to get your shape out correctly and to slot it back together again after inking without smudging the ink all over each part. So you need to keep the black on the black and the red on the red. So with that, I will say goodbye and wish you all a very good Christmas season. Bye for now.